Hello, everyone. I hope your affairs are in order because we have another sign that the apocalypse may be upon us, on top of all the other signs we've seen in and out of the sports world. College game day is going to be in Tuscaloosa on Saturday, not for a Georgia game, not for an LSU game, not for an Iron Bowl, but for Vanderbilt's visit to the capstone. And I had to ask the question, I have to ask the question in advance of that game, is Alabama man enough to beat Vanderbilt? And I say that without my tongue firmly planted in my cheek. I say that without snark or sarcasm. I say that because we all saw what happened almost 365 days ago in Nashville, Tennessee, when the world turned upside down and Alabama, coming off a win against Georgia to move to number one in the country, ran headlong into Diego Pavia, and the final score was Vanderbilt 40, Alabama 35. And now Vanderbilt's rolling in thinking they are a better team than they were last year. They have a better record than Alabama does right now. And they feel very confident that they can go back-to-back against Alabama. And you know how insane that would be? From the year before Bear Bryant returned to his alma mater to take over as the Alabama coach, 1957, he came back in 1958. From that year through the year that Nick Saban walked away, 2023, that's a long, long, long time. In that long span of decades, Vanderbilt beat Alabama exactly twice, in 1969 and in 1984. And here we sit 48 hours or so away from a chance that Vanderbilt could beat Alabama twice in 2 years. College football has changed. Hello, everyone. I'm Kevin Skarbinski. This is ScarboKnows, and I have never in my long career been more excited about an Alabama-Vanderbilt football game. This is going to tell us a lot about where Vanderbilt is under Clark Lee in that incredible rebuilding job that he's done, and more importantly, where Alabama and Kalen DeBoer are. Because I'll tell you this, they're not out of the woods. He has not won over the fan base 100%. Yeah, everybody's feeling really good after that trip to Athens and that impressive performance to beat Georgia. But again, we've seen this movie, and they didn't respond well to a win over Georgia last year. Let's say thank you, first of all, to our sponsor and say hello to our sponsor, Money Management Services, Birmingham's financial services company. They are family-owned, and what really makes them unique is they are fee-only in their approach to helping you with all manner of your financial matters. The Rice family, great friends of mine. They'll take good care of you. You'll hear more from them later in the show. So let's get into it. Let's get into Alabama, Vanderbilt as the biggest game in the country. Sorry, Florida State. No apologies to you, Miami. I know those fan bases and media that cover those teams have been whining and crying since College Game Day announced that it was not going to Tallahassee to put a spotlight on those traditional rivals. Instead, it's heading to Tuscaloosa for a game that really is more important in a lot of ways. Because if Alabama, if Alabama doesn't win this game, if you thought the backlash, the outcry, the uproar was bad, directed at Kalen DeBoer after the Florida State loss, that was a picnic compared to how the Alabama fan base will react to a second straight loss to Vanderbilt. And Vanderbilt is feeling itself. The Commodores are 5-0. They haven't played a gauntlet of a schedule, but they are 5-0. And you build confidence as you do that. And what they've also displayed is they have one of the better offenses in the SEC and maybe the country. They have one of the better quarterbacks in the SEC and maybe the country. And Diego Pavia has already run his mouth. He's already gone the Thomas Castellanos route. You'll remember the Florida State quarterback back during the summer. He told Alabama what he was going to do to them. He told them Nick Saban wouldn't be there to save them. And he was right on both counts. And Florida State, its new Gus Malzahn offense, had its way with the Alabama defense. So what did Diego Pavia say going into this game? Let's look at what he told Chris Lowe from On3, one of the best reporters covering college football. And it was all kinds of disrespect directed at Alabama. I know we've got to bring it, he said. That's for sure. The crowd, I think, is going to be a big factor in the game. But we just got to play within the white lines. Now, if he had stopped there, nobody would have blinked. But he didn't stop there because he's Diego Pavia. He said, if we do that, if we play our game, it won't be close. Hello. It won't be close. This is the Vanderbilt quarterback telling the world that if they do what they're capable of doing, they won't just beat Alabama in Tuscaloosa. They will put Alabama to sleep in Tuscaloosa. And the game won't be a game in the fourth quarter. It won't be competitive. And Vanderbilt will show that it is the better team. And I cannot imagine the minds that will be blown if it plays out that way. You know, there was a time, certainly during the Saban era, when you didn't hear people call out Alabama. Well, actually, you did. I stand corrected. I should have remembered this. In 2017, a Vanderbilt defensive lineman, whose name escapes me at the moment, after Vanderbilt started 3-0, he said on camera before he left the field, "You're next, Alabama." And I'll never forget the reaction of Alabama quarterback Jalen Hurts, who I'm not sure is totally human. I think he's part cyborg. He looked at the camera when he was asked about that and during the week and said, well, technically, he's right. We are next. The result, Alabama 59, Vanderbilt 0. So there were rare occasions when someone was foolish enough, a member of an opposing team, before playing Alabama, to let Alabama know that they weren't scared of them, and they told them what they were going to do to them, and it usually didn't work out well. Well, that trend, another trend that's been broken under Kalen DeBoer, started with Thomas Castellanos from Florida State, and here comes Diego Pavia, who's a better player, a better quarterback than Castellanos, who's a better player, a better quarterback than he was last year. But don't take my word for it. Someone else has a lot of confidence in Diego Pavia. Someone else who's been there and done that and turned Alabama on its head in Bryant-Denny Stadium back in 2012. Alabama was rolling towards a second straight national championship. And in its first year in the SEC, here comes Texas A&M. With this cocky QB, this Johnny football. I think it was before he did the Money Manziel sign. He walks in there as a redshirt freshman against one of the better defenses of the Saban era, one of the better teams in the Saban era, and he controlled the game. Before you could blink, A&M was up 3 scores. And, of course, because it was Saban's Alabama and it was one of his better teams, they fought back. But Johnny Manziel, he just laughed. He just made play after play, threw the game-winning touchdown pass. And then Alabama drove down. They had the last word, or could have had the last word, but A.J. McCarron threw an interception at the goal line, and Texas A&M walked out of there with the 29-24 victory. Alabama still went on and won the national championship, but Johnny Manziel, if there's ever been a Heisman moment, there were a whole series of them in Bryant-Denny Stadium that day. Now, here's what he had to say. And by the way, he is mentoring. This news came out this week. He is mentoring Diego Pavia. And he had this to say about this game. I beat them once. He has a chance to beat them twice. That's the kind of stuff they build statues for. And there you see a picture of Johnny Manziel and his teammates celebrating after that win in Tuscaloosa back in 2012. That's the kind of stuff. Of course, he didn't say stuff. This is a family show. We'll say stuff. They build statues for beating Alabama twice. How about this statistic? Think about this. Since 2008, 6 starting quarterbacks have won a game in Bryant-Denny Stadium. And you may have heard of some of these guys. We already mentioned Manziel. He won the Heisman. Cam Newton in 2010 won the Heisman in the national championship. Joe Burrow in 2019 with LSU won the Heisman and the national championship. Quinn Ewers in 2023 led Texas to a Big 12 title in the college football playoff. Chad Kelly at Ole Miss in 2015. Swag Kelly had a huge game that night to beat Alabama with Hugh Freeze, who got his second straight win over the Crimson Tide. Little did we know a decade later it would get him the Auburn job. Hasn't worked out so well so far. And then the quarterback that really doesn't fit in that group is Jarrett Lee. I think Jarrett Lee actually started. Remember the game of the century in 2011 at Alabama between LSU and Alabama? Two of the better defenses you'll ever see on the same field. There were 50-something, I don't know, maybe even more players that went on to play in the NFL. Nobody could find the end zone. LSU ended up winning in overtime. Nothing but field goals, 9-6. As thrilling a game as I've ever attended in person, certainly, without a touchdown. Because you just were on the edge of your seat. You just knew one play was going to decide it. But LSU starting quarterback, I think they went with Jarrett Lee that night. Jordan Jefferson also played. Not exactly two of the bigger names in SEC history at that position. But we have had some of the bigger names in SEC history at that position. It took them taking their team and doing their thing in Bryant-Denny Stadium to beat Saban's Alabama. This isn't Saban's Alabama. So Diego Pavia has a chance to do what those guys, they never even got a chance to beat Alabama twice. Back to it. Well, I stand corrected. Actually, Cam Newton didn't get a chance to beat Alabama twice because he was at Auburn for only one season. One spectacular, iconic, memorable season for Auburn. Actually, Johnny Manziel had a chance to beat Alabama twice after taking them down in Tuscaloosa. The very next year, Alabama goes to College Station, and Johnny Manziel put up even bigger numbers, but Alabama won a shootout 49-42. So Diego Pavia can do something that Johnny Football didn't do and had the opportunity to do. And why is this possible? Why should we believe that this can happen again and it not just be lightning striking twice? Have you looked at Vanderbilt's numbers this year? Have you looked at where they stand in the SEC statistics on the offensive side of the ball compared to what they did to Alabama last year? Let's look at those numbers, and they're pretty startling. Ball don't lie. Last year when Vanderbilt beat Alabama 40-35, they ran off 75 plays. Not eye-popping numbers, 166 yards on the ground, 252 through the air, 418 total. But here's what stood out. 12 for 18 on third down. Almost as impressive as Alabama's 13 for 19 at Georgia last week. And time of possession, 42 minutes and 8 seconds. Vanderbilt controlled the ball against Alabama. Historically, the top program in the SEC and the bottom program in the SEC. Vanderbilt controlled the ball for 42 minutes of the 60 minutes of game time. That is absurd because they kept converting third downs. Alabama's defense couldn't get off the field. And Vanderbilt ran out the last 2.5 minutes when Alabama desperately needed one more shot to try to win the game. They couldn't get a stop. And the Commodores celebrated an iconic victory. And you thought, well, you could say, well, yeah, maybe again it was lightning striking in a rare occurrence, but look where Vanderbilt ranks this year. Again, not against the greatest schedule, but they're second in the SEC in scoring, 49 points a game. They're second in rushing, a little under 225. Seventh in passing, and Pavia is a much better passer. Clark Lee talked about that the other day. Pavia is a much more accurate passer, much more confident passer than he was a year ago. They're throwing for 271 a game. Their total offense is fifth in the conference. They're just under 500 yards a game. And look at those two stats that really proved the difference last year. On third down, Vandy is second in the conference, about 61% conversion rate. Auburn wishes it were even close to that neighborhood. And time of possession, Vanderbilt also is second in the league, 32 and a half minutes a game, which pales compared to what they did against Alabama last year when they controlled it for 42 minutes. That's embarrassing. That should have every Alabama defender, every Alabama defensive coach hanging their head that they allowed Vanderbilt to do that to them last year in Nashville. And if we see numbers similar to that, then Vanderbilt is going to make history. They are going to beat Alabama 2 years in a row, which they haven't done since the outset of the Cold War. And Diego Pavia probably will get a statue built to him. He will be even more legendary than he already is. And there's another reason why you should believe in Vanderbilt. There's another reason for you to think, you know what? This is entirely possible that they could beat Alabama again. Because Diego Pavia owns the state of Alabama. Here are the receipts. Look at what he's done against teams from the state of Alabama or in games in the state of Alabama. He's 5-0. This goes back to his last year at New Mexico State. And again, sorry, Auburn fans, to bring up that bad memory. New Mexico State 31, Auburn 10 from Hugh Freeze's first year. The next week, actually, New Mexico State beat Jack State 20-17. And then last year, of course, Vanderbilt with Pavia running the show took down Alabama. And then he wasn't fully healthy later in the season and didn't play a great game, but he did enough against, stop me if you've heard this one before, an anemic Auburn offense, and Vanderbilt won in Jordan-Hare Stadium 17-7. And then to cap it off, at the end of last season, Vanderbilt came to Birmingham, to the Birmingham Bowl, and Pavia had a big game, and they beat Georgia Tech 35-27. Think about that. He's 5-0. Now, I am not a political commentator, but I'm going to suggest, especially now when we're in an age where to get elected to high office in this state, apparently you just have to have a college football connection. See United States Senator Tommy Tuberville, who, by the way, lost his last game against Vanderbilt when he was at Auburn back in 2008, contributed to him being nudged toward the exit door. You had Bruce Pearl, the now retired Auburn basketball coach, thinking seriously about running for Tuberville's U.S. Senate seat. And why is that seat coming open? Because Tommy Tuberville is going to run for governor in the state of Alabama. He is running. He's already announced. He's already raised a ridiculous amount of money. He will have no opposition. Most likely, he will roll to victory because of name recognition. And this is a football state, and football is our unofficial religion. And so, and you know, people have questioned. Kyle Whitmire from AL.com has done a great job of questioning whether Tuberville actually lived in Alabama before he ran for the Senate in the first place. But apparently residency here is, preferred but not required. And apparently knowledge of politics is preferred but not required if the people know you because of your affiliation with college football. And there we have it. Can we change the H to a D on that graphic, Brendan? Brilliant work there by Brendan Martin, our executive producer at Sidelines.live. There you see Paul Feinbaum. There he is. And by now you've heard the news that he is thinking seriously about running for the United States Senate from the state of Alabama to fill Tuberville's seat again, which he vacated to become governor. Tuberville's already said, I think he'll do a great job if he decides to run. Lane Kiffin has already endorsed him. Is Paul Feinbaum, the mouth of the South, the voice of the SEC network commentator, ESPN commentator, is he really going to walk away from all of that money, that cushy gig that he has, that he built into something? Let's give him full credit. Now, Paul and I, if you know the backstory, he used to be a columnist for the Birmingham Post-Herald. I was a columnist for the Birmingham News. We were competitors. We didn't really like each other very much. We have since buried the hatchet, and we get along fine, and he invites me on his show every once in a while on the SEC network, which I appreciate. But Paul is very serious about this. This is not a publicity stunt from what I've been told. So we'll see how that turns out. We're not going to get too deep into politics here, but Diego Pavia has owned the state of Alabama in a way that Paul Feinbaum never did, and certainly Tommy Tuberville never did, although Tuberville did win 6 straight in the Iron Bowl. So he got extra points with the voters for that. Now, here is what's really strange about this game. And one more sign that college football has changed. Look at the records of Vanderbilt and Alabama since they met last year on October 5th, 2024. That was not a one-off. Vanderbilt since then is 10-4. Alabama and Kalen DeBoer since then are 8-5. In fact, to put Alabama's 5 losses in the last 13 games in perspective, I looked this up the other day because I was looking at Hugh Freeze, because he's been the coach at Auburn now for exactly 30 games. And Hugh Freeze is 14-16 in those 30 games. So I wanted to know who have been the best coaches in the SEC, who has the best record in those last 30 games, in their last 30 games. Kirby Smart, no surprise, when I did this, was 25-5. Lane Kiffin, no real surprise, in his last 30 games was 25-5. Eli Drinkwitz at Missouri, this is probably a surprise. Not so much if you look at the schedule, but Eli's done a really nice job there. They are 25-5 in their last 30 games. So those coaches have lost 5 games in the last 30. Kalen DeBoer's lost 5 games in his last 13 at Alabama. That's why this game is all important for Kalen DeBoer. But it's also a sign that college football is never going to be the same. You know, every once in a while, it doesn't happen very often, you have a pivotal moment in time that tells you that what came before was the past and it's over, and you're witnessing the arrival of the future. I can recall one game in particular in SEC history. There are others, of course, but one that I am familiar with was in 1990. It was November 3rd, 1990 to be exact. Auburn was coached by Pat Dye. Auburn had won 3 straight SEC titles. Auburn had beaten Alabama 4 straight times. Pat Dye seemed to be on top of his game. He was old school. He was a Bear Bryant disciple. He was all about running the dang ball. Nobody ever had to tell Pat Dye to run the dang ball the way Auburn fans are screaming at Hugh Freeze right now. Pat Dye believed in running the ball, playing defense, and being sound in the kicking game. So on November 3rd, 1990, Pat Dye takes his Auburn team to Gainesville, Florida. And who's sitting there waiting for him in his first year as the head coach of the Florida Gators but Steve Spurrier? The philosophies of Steve Spurrier and Pat Dye when it came to football couldn't be more different. Fun and gun, throw the ball all over the yard, wear a visor, be Darth Visor, pop off about your opponents on a regular basis. rub their nose in it every chance you get. That was Steve Spurrier. That was the opposite of Pat Dye. And what happened when the past met the future? Florida 48, Auburn 7. That was a watershed moment for SEC football. It would never quite be the same. And I would argue that what we saw on October 5th, 2024 in Nashville, Tennessee was another watershed moment. Because what happened in that Vanderbilt-Alabama game a year ago showed us that the worst program historically in the SEC could not only compete for an afternoon with the best program historically in the conference, it could beat them. It could beat them by being stronger and tougher, being more mentally sound, being more mentally prepared. And if you remember, there were some mental breakdowns at the end of that game for Alabama, some behavior that was not very becoming of a program that likes to throw the word around class. They weren't very classy in defeat a couple of players at the end of that game. But that told you something. And we knew it was coming with NIL, with the transfer portal, and then, of course, a change in leadership in Tuscaloosa with Kalen DeBoer taking over for Nick Saban. It was never going to be the same. And so, since then, like I said, Vanderbilt has a better record than Alabama. And one of the reasons they do, and I want to shout out my friends at the next round, Jim Dunaway, Ryan Brown, and Lance Taylor. Those guys do a great job on their show. Known them for a long time. They put together a great roster age breakdown. And this blew my mind. It didn't surprise me in one way, but it blew my mind in another. They calculated the percentage of the roster that has already graduated from college. That is, the senior class, junior class, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And they discovered that Vanderbilt is the oldest team in the SEC. They have 26 players who have already earned their college degrees. And that's not an easy thing to do at Vanderbilt. Now, they all haven't been at Vanderbilt for their entire college careers, obviously. You've got transfers in that mix, Diego Pavia chiefly among them. But 26 college graduates and 50 more upperclassmen. Age matters. Experience makes a difference. And this Vanderbilt team has experienced success. They've experienced success against Alabama. Hence the confidence flowing forth from Diego Pavia before they ever get on a plane to fly south to take on that team that just beat Georgia, that's feeling really good about itself. So who wins this game? Are we going to see what really wouldn't be an upset? I know Alabama's ranked higher, but Vanderbilt is ranked. I know Alabama's favored, but it's not by 2 or 3 touchdowns the way it was last year. I know Alabama's playing at home, and Kalen DeBoer has not lost a home game. I know that the quarterbacks that beat Alabama in Bryant-Denny Stadium, or have in the last couple of decades, have been generational quarterbacks. Like I said, Cam Newton, Johnny Manziel, Joe Burrow, to a lesser extent, Quinn Ewers, Chad Kelly. So, and by the way, I left this out earlier. Guess who's going to be on the Vanderbilt sideline on Saturday wearing a Diego Pavia jersey? Johnny Manziel himself. You talk about anti-Alabama mojo. That's anti-Alabama mojo grande. To have Johnny Football there mentoring, cheering on, advising Diego Pavia in Bryant-Denny Stadium. So put all of that together, and that's why I asked the original question. Is Alabama man enough to beat Vanderbilt? Let's look at the prediction. Which way did I come down on this question? I say yes. I say it'll be a shootout. I say it'll be a 4-quarter game. I say Vanderbilt will not flinch, even if it falls behind early by 2 touchdowns, the way Georgia did not flinch when Alabama came out of the gate. So efficient and effective on offense last week between the hedges and Athens. But my bottom line on this game is Ty Simpson is a better quarterback than Diego Pavia. And that is not a shot at Diego Pavia. That is a compliment to Ty Simpson. What we saw him do in Athens was extraordinary. The confidence that he played with, the self-assuredness that he threw the ball with. He found his receiver and he let it go. And he was throwing fastballs. I don't know what the radar gun, I don't know if they put radar guns on football quarterbacks. I would have loved to have seen a radar gun on Ty Simpson on some of those throws. That first touchdown to Jeremy Bernard, for example. And what told me that this Alabama team might be a little different, now that it's grown up, now that it's tasted its own blood in Tallahassee, and why it might not fall apart the way it did last year on far too many occasions. Go back to the first drive against Georgia. Ryan Williams runs free through the secondary. And Ty Simpson drops it right in his pocket. And Ryan Williams drops it right to the turf. Now, a lesser team, a lesser quarterback, a lesser wide receiver would have buckled a bit at that moment. Ty Simpson didn't buckle. He just led Alabama down the field, just took a little longer, and they still scored a touchdown on that drive. Ryan Williams actually bounced back, didn't have a dominant game, didn't have any memorable plays other than the drop, the way he did against Georgia last year, but he did contribute. He made some tough catches in traffic, took some punishment, and held on to the ball. Kalen DeBoer's team showed me something, the way that they played in Athens. And if you were wondering what all the fuss was about with Ryan Grubb and Kalen DeBoer as a dynamic duo, as Batman and Robin, especially on the offensive side of the ball, DeBoer as a head coach, Grubb as his offensive coordinator, why they were so successful at Washington, why Nick Saban tried to hire Ryan Grubb in Tuscaloosa a couple of years ago, and why DeBoer missed him last year. It was on full display because very rarely do you see an offensive coordinator put Kirby Smart's defense in a blender. And that's exactly what Ryan Grubb and company did last week. I think they can do it again. I think they can do it consistently. I think Alabama is going to win primarily with offense. We still have a lot of questions about Kane Womack, the defensive coordinator. Better not let Vanderbilt keep the ball for 42 minutes this week, or Vanderbilt will win again. And Kalen DeBoer will be on the hot seat far greater than he was after the Florida State loss. We'll see how it turns out. I can't wait. Biggest Vanderbilt-Alabama game ever. Should be a lot of fun. Thank you guys for listening. Thank you for watching. Thank you for supporting. If you watch on the YouTube channel, please like and subscribe. That helps us. We appreciate it. Thank you to executive producer Brendan Martin for the great work that he does, especially with that Feinbaum poster. I won't be able to get that out of my mind the rest of the day. And thank you especially to our sponsor, Money Management Services. Check them out. They'll take great care of you. Have a great day, everyone.
Since 1992, Money Management Services in Birmingham has provided individuals and business owners with trusted, fee-only financial advice. We're more than advisors, we're your financial family. From retirement planning to tax strategies and estate planning, our team builds personalized wealth management plans tailored to your life. At Money Management Services, we treat you like family, because when you walk through our doors, you become part of ours.